I was recently visiting with an acquaintance who asked, "What are you doing these days, Heather?" And when I mentioned I was a faculty member in a seminary and taught core counseling courses in our program, I could see this puzzled look appear on her face. And I had a sense, kind of an intuition of what could be coming next. Sure enough, she asked, "What does seminary mean? Is that like training for priests, or what is that all about?" Well, when you hear the term seminary education, what comes to your mind? Like my new friend, you might be uncertain about what it all means. You might imagine classrooms that are focused quite specifically on theology, biblical studies, or ancient languages. Perhaps you picture a setting designed just for pulpit or church ministry preparation. And I would say if that were all that seminary education provided, I think it would be extremely valuable. But my story is that having received my undergraduate and graduate education in psychology in secular academic institutions, I decided to pursue a graduate certificate in biblical and theological studies from Horizon Seminary to enrich my training as a psychologist. And what truly surprised me the most was that seminary education offered a much broader experience than I originally imagined. It offered me the opportunity to grow not only in my understanding of theology and biblical studies, it was also deeply relevant to my understanding of modern life and current societal issues and their interface with my clinical practice in psychology. Added to this, I would say that the most powerful benefit of seminary education was one that I hadn't even anticipated. And the reason for that is I simply hadn't experienced it in the same way during my path through secular education. And that is deeper formation in Christlikeness and personal spiritual growth that left my life transformed in ways far beyond what I could have imagined. It was as though the words of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 3 were leaping off the page and into the depths of my heart with fresh understanding when he writes, "Now to God, who is able to do far more abundantly and beyond all that we ask or think, according to his power that works within us." And I can say to you, in all honesty, I was experiencing something of the power of God at work within me while I studied in a way that truly transcended even the specific topic of study before me. So tonight, I want to expand on these benefits that I received from my experience with seminary education and encourage you to consider the unexpected value that's also available to you should you choose this path as your own personal training ground as well. Firstly, I want to just mention in the clinical space, as a psychologist who provides counseling, I'm often confronted with some of the most difficult questions in life through what my clients bring to our sessions together. These are questions like, why do good people experience suffering? Where was God when I was assaulted? If there is a God, how could he let this tragedy happen to my loved one? The clients that I worked with were trying to make sense of the suffering they were experiencing, and they were asking for my help to do that. They weren't asking for an academic course in theology, but they were asking hard theological questions. And my secular training didn't prepare me adequately to address the questions that people bring into the clinical space. Oh, it did a great job of teaching me the skills of a psychologist, like how do I conduct a clinical interview? What are robust assessment approaches? How do I apply theoretical orientations? How do I use metaphors or gentle confrontation? but it didn't even come close to answering the question carried by so many people who are walking through my counseling door, carrying a heavy burden of grief or trauma. And that question is, where is God? And does he care that I'm hurting right now? And although I knew intuitively and experientially from my own Christian walk that God did indeed care when one of his children was hurting, it was in seminary that I learned in a deeper and richer way that the Lord is indeed close to the brokenhearted, and his desire is to reach out and to save those who are crushed in spirit. Theological perspectives enhanced my understanding of Emmanuel, God who is with us, and who we are as human beings created in his image, yet living in a fallen world. Seminary education also helped me to clarify my own theological convictions. And this is really important as a Christian clinician, because I bring my theological convictions into the counseling space, whether I do that explicitly with Christian clients or I'm doing that implicitly with clients who are not Christian. And I discovered that what I believe about human nature had an impact on the kind of clinician that I was, and the kind of therapy that I offered, and the kind of meaning that I invite my clients to make of the trials and the tribulations that they are facing. At the same time, in seminary, I learned the value of not rushing to easy answers. I learned that there were theological tensions that needed to be grappled with and considered from a posture of humility. In many educational settings, students are rewarded for certainty. We learn the right response. We learn that if we repeat it accurately, we can move on to the next learning task. In contrast to that, I found that seminary places us as students in the middle of some of life's biggest questions about meaning, about suffering, about justice, about doubt or hope. And it asks us to stay there, and yet to do so from a posture of humility. At times, my seminary training invited me to acknowledge, I don't know yet, and to be able to do that with a little less fear and being okay that I didn't know all the answers. And in a world that's increasingly polarized by strong opinions and keyboard warriors, I think this ability to hold complexity without collapsing either into arrogance or cynicism, I think it's kind of rare. And yet at the same time, I think it's pretty powerful. In a world where everyone kind of seems to be talking, and yet very few are listening, I found that seminary forms people who can enter into really difficult conversation around the larger questions of life without having to dominate those conversations. It shapes people who can hear pain without turning away from that pain, and people who understand that being heard is often more healing than being advised or told what to do or told what the right answer is in their circumstance. Secondly, most graduate programs, I think, focus on what you know. They teach you skills and concepts and then assess your grasp of those. And while this is an important part of seminary education too, I also found that it focused on something, I want to say, that's much more difficult. And that is who I was becoming. In seminary, the education I received wasn't only cognitive, it was also deeply formative in terms of character and Christlikeness. I was asked to do the hard work of reflecting on my motives, My daily habits, that's nobody's business. Oh, yes, it is, I found out. My biases and my fears and my questions about God. I was challenged to examine how I treat others, how I respond to criticism, what my priorities in life are. And even deeper, how do I order the loves in my life rightly and in a way that's pleasing to God? Yeah, you know what? There were lots of times of just slugging through the assignments and feeling the stress of it all in seminary. That's real. But I'm saying to you honestly, there were these other holy moments during the hours of reading and reflection and writing where I sensed I was beholding something of the glory of God. And I was even in a small way being transformed more fully into His image, even while I studied. This kind of education produces something that I think our world is in desperate need of these days. And that is Christian leaders whose inner lives are as developed as our busy outer lives. That is Christian leaders who know how to sit at the feet of Jesus and remain there until we receive from Him what is needed to go out and represent Him well in this world. And these same Christian leaders who then have the self-awareness and the insight to discern when we're depleted and we need to withdraw again to a lonely place to be alone with Jesus, sitting at His feet again to receive what we most need from Him. So in the end, the dividends that I received from my journey through seminary education made it one of the most valuable investments in my life. It made me not only a better psychologist, not only a better faculty member, but truly a better person. One who I hope is more like Jesus today than I was before I embarked on this journey. To me, that is time and resources so well spent. And I want to invite you to come and join us on this transformative journey. I had heard from some of my acquaintances and even some of my colleagues here about the transformative experience of biblical and theological studies in my case, but it wasn't until I stepped into that realm. And I think, to be honest, my thought was, how could it be transformative unless there's an experiential component to it? But I found that so many of the courses and the topics within the courses became a personal meeting ground between me and God to sort out deep questions that I held about His nature and His character, and to process those between He and I, but also in a community of people that was also grappling with and sorting through those questions.